Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chemical Safety Technology course. I am your instructor, Suo Yanbo. In this session, we will explore the safety guidelines for the transportation of hazardous chemicals. First, let's watch a video. This is a scene captured by surveillance cameras at the Wenling section of the Shanghai Expressway on June 13, 2020. This is a simulation of the accident.
At around 1640 on the 13th of June, 2020, a Dongfeng brand semi-trailer tanker, loaded with approximately 25 tons of liquefied petroleum gas, LPG consisting of 60% propane and 40% butane, and with a filling pressure of 1200 kPa, approximately 12 atmospheres, was traveling on a section of the Shanghai Expressway near Wenling, Taizhou City, Zhejiang Province. When entering the Wenling West exit ramp of the Shanghai Expressway heading towards Wenzhou, the vehicle did not slow down according to the road speed limit of 30 km per h. It entered the ramp at an actual speed of 52 to 54 km per h, overturned to the right, scraped against the rotating guardrail of the ramp, and slid forward. The tanker collided with the concrete guardrail end of the overpass bridge on the ramp, causing the tanker to rupture and disintegrate. The tractor and semi-trailer separated, with tanker fragments and the semi-trailer flying out in different directions. The LPG in the tanker quickly leaked, vaporized, diffused, and spread. The entire accident process was divided into 4 stages: tanker rupture, LPG leakage and diffusion, initial deflagration, and secondary vapor cloud explosion.
The accident investigation concluded that the explosion of this liquefied petroleum gas (LPG) tanker truck, carrying approximately 20 tons of cargo, caused massive damage. Ultimately, the accident resulted in 20 deaths, 175 hospitalizations, and direct economic losses of 94.77815 million yuan. This was the most severe in-service LPG tanker truck explosion in nearly 20 years. This incident was a major industrial safety accident caused by a LPG tanker truck traveling at excessive speed on a highway ramp, resulting in a rollover, collision, and leakage, which subsequently triggered an explosion. China is a major producer and user of hazardous chemicals, which are typically transported by rail, water, and road using trains, ships, and trucks. Since most of the transported substances are flammable and explosive, and transportation is often affected by factors such as climate, terrain, and the environment, safety requirements for such transport are generally high. So, what precautions should be taken when transporting hazardous chemicals? First, let's examine the loading principles for hazardous chemical transportation. Since the hazards of hazardous chemicals vary, items with conflicting properties can often cause combustion or explosions when they come into contact, and the fire extinguishing agents and methods used in the event of a fire are not entirely the same. Therefore, to ensure safety during loading and transport, relevant loading principles must be followed. The loading and unloading of toxic and hazardous liquids should employ closed system operations, and ventilation at the worksite should be enhanced by installing local ventilation and purification systems, as well as residual liquid recovery systems. Packaging must comply with requirements, and during transport, appropriate personal protective equipment must be worn and necessary emergency response tools provided. When handling, materials must be loaded and unloaded gently. Impacts, vibrations, and inversion are strictly prohibited. Safety precautions for road transport of hazardous chemicals. When transporting hazardous chemicals by road, vehicles must display signs indicating the transport of dangerous goods. While driving or parked, maintain a safe distance from other vehicles, high-voltage power lines, densely populated areas, tall buildings, and key cultural heritage protection zones. Follow routes and schedules designated by local public security authorities. Overtaking, speeding, and overloading are strictly prohibited to prevent friction and impact. Vehicles must be equipped with appropriate safety protection facilities. Safety precautions for the rail transport of hazardous chemicals. Railways are the primary means of transporting chemical raw materials and products. Tank cars are typically used for flammable and combustible liquids, while specialized hazardous materials freight cars are used for other dangerous goods. Platforms used for loading and unloading flammable and combustible liquids and other hazardous materials must be constructed of non-combustible materials. Safety ladders must be installed every 60 meters along the platform to facilitate personnel evacuation and firefighting. Electrical equipment on the loading platform must be explosion-proof, and fire extinguishing equipment and fire water supply facilities must be provided. Steam locomotives should not enter the loading platform. If entry is unavoidable, a spark arrestor must be installed on the smokestack. When stopping, wooden blocks should be used instead of the brakes to prevent sparks. A buffer car must be placed between the locomotive and the tank car. Emergency shutoff valves should be installed on pipelines used for loading flammable liquids. Tank cars must not leak oil. The flow rate of loading and unloading hoses should not be too high, and connecting hoses should be properly grounded to prevent the generation of static sparks. Loading and unloading operations should be suspended during thunderstorms. Open flames or ordinary flashlights must not be used for nighttime inspections. Safety precautions for the waterway transport of hazardous chemicals. When vessels are carrying flammable or explosive goods, they must display dangerous goods markings. The use of open flames on board is strictly prohibited. Coal-fired tugboats must be equipped with spark arrestors, and the safety distance between the stern of the tugboat and the bow of the barge must not be less than 50 meters. Motor vessels transporting flammable liquids with a flash point below 28 degrees Celsius must be approved by local inspection authorities. Wooden vessels are prohibited from transporting bulk flammable liquids, highly toxic substances, radioactive materials, or other hazardous substances. The transport of highly toxic substances is strictly prohibited in enclosed waters. When loading or unloading flammable liquids, the shoreside oil transfer line must be securely connected to the vessel's oil transfer line, and the vessel's hull must be connected to the metal body of the oil pump vessel or oil pumping station using a conductor with a diameter of no less than 2.5 millimeters. During oil transfer operations, the conductor must be connected first, followed by the transfer line. Upon completion of loading or unloading, disconnect the oil pipes first, then remove the grounding wire. After unloading is complete, a thorough cleaning must be performed. Vessels and vehicles that have carried highly toxic substances must be washed and disinfected immediately after unloading. Otherwise, their use is strictly prohibited. Packaging of hazardous chemicals. Packaging must comply with the general technical conditions for the transport packaging of dangerous goods. Provisions on the administration of road transport of dangerous goods. Supervision regulations on safety technology for gas cylinder. Relevant requirements of railway tank car for liquefied gases. Relevant requirements of railway tank car for liquefied gases. All flammable, explosive, toxic, and other hazardous products leaving the factory must have a dedicated packaging label securely and clearly affixed to the packaged item. The basic requirements for packaging labels, including name, scope of application, graphics, colors, and dimensions, must comply with the national standard packaging symbol of dangerous goods. Chemical labeling shall be carried out in accordance with the China National Standard of Specification for Classification and Labeling of Chemicals Part 1 Narrow Rules, Standards for the Classification and Labeling of Chemicals. The GB 30000 series of national standards incorporates most of the content from the 4th edition of the United Nations Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals (GHS). A chemical safety label refers to a label affixed to chemical packaging by the manufacturer or seller when the chemical is distributed in the market. It serves as a medium for conveying safety information to workers. It uses simple, easy-to-understand text and graphics to describe the hazardous properties of the chemical and precautions for its safe handling. It alerts workers to perform safe operations and disposal procedures. Chemical safety labels shall include the substance name, identification number, hazard symbols, signal words, hazard overview, safety measures, firefighting methods, manufacturers, address, telephone number, emergency contact information, telephone instructions, and a reference to the safety data sheet (SDS). Regulations regarding the safe transport of hazardous chemicals are outlined in Chapter 3, Transport Safety, of the Regulations on the Safety Management of Hazardous Chemicals, State Council Order No. 591. In this lesson, we studied the safety of hazardous chemical transportation, learned about the principles of loading and stowage for hazardous chemical transport, and reviewed safety precautions for transportation by road, rail, and water. We also learned about the packaging and labeling of hazardous chemicals. That concludes this session. For your reflection after class, please consider the following question. What are the requirements for the safe transport of hazardous chemicals? Alright, that concludes this session. See you in the next class.